When people talk about land grab or water grab, it's so emotive that immediately the image conjured or up in people's mind is these are people coming to steal our property. But it's not that black and white. The point is foreign direct investment in agricultural land could be beneficial to both the investor as well as the local smallholder farmers. And the real issue is how do we get that model of investment to work both for the investor as well as for agricultural productivity, food security, as well as livelihoods of the small farmers in Africa.
Now we read that it's a growing trend. Just what is the scale of the issue at the moment? Are we seeing lots of foreign direct investment? Are we seeing lots of land being taken up by sovereign wealth funds and other investors?
Indeed, the scale is huge, and it's going to continue to increase over the next few years, simply because apart from the Amazon in Brazil, the last frontier in terms of available land and water resources is in Africa. And as such, both sovereign wealth funds, private investors, hedge funds are all interested in investing in Africa. But not forgetting also there are local investors, national investors, people in diaspora who have saved up money who would like to invest in land. So the scale is huge. But because of the nature of these investment deals, no one has any accurate estimate of what is going on. It depends on who you're talking with. For instance, in Ethiopia, it's reckoned that it could be anything in the region of 600,000 hectares to about 3.6 million hectares. The other point that makes it difficult to have an accurate estimate is some investors will acquire land, but will only use a tiny proportion of it. So the question is, do you look at the entire acquisition or you look at the proportion being put into productive use when you estimate the amount of land acquired? Because in nearly all cases, they're not given a leasehold forever. There's a time limit on leaseholds, and in some countries also they include a clause that if you don't use the land within a certain time period, it will be taken back from you. So those are the issues that complicate it, but it's a huge problem.
Now
it's growing.
Now you talked quite a lot there about land. To what extent is this about land, or to what extent is it about access to water?
It is access to water disguised, because land in itself is a resource that is not productive unless you have adequate access to water. So implicitly, when we talk about land acquisition, is also water acquisition. Land and water are intertwined, and to improve productivity of any land for that matter, you need water. And what our research has found out is that even for those marginal crops that are supposed to do very well in marginal lands, for adequate production and productivity, you need to irrigate water. And that's one of the things that we're talking about this afternoon, that biofuels, there is a certain group of biofuels, jatropha for instance, that is supposed to thrive in marginal lands. But for effective productivity of jatropha, it needs to be irrigated. And so land acquisition is implicitly water acquisition as well. But the problem is that in most of the countries where land acquisition is going on, the water assessment hardly ever comes into the discussion when land is being acquired. It's only, we found in Ghana that the separate and parallel systems of administration of land and water means in effect that an investor can come in, acquire land, and only after the land has been acquired can they start talking to the regulatory agencies that control water to say, I need a water permit, by which time it's already too late. The land has been acquired and people have been displaced. their water rights they've been deprived of their water rights. And the effect is that you've taken away the water rights of many people.
Now, proponents of foreign direct investment would say it brings in new technology, it brings in much needed investment into agriculture, maybe can contribute to local food security, though I know often the food is exported, maybe create local employment. Against that, there are huge risks, I understand, from the fact that many people in poor parts of the world don't have proper tenure, that they don't have a political voice, that they may not be consulted. Do you think the risks outweigh the benefits?
It depends on how you manage the risk. There's no doubt that Africa needs investment. Africa needs technical know-how that can come in through foreign direct investment. But there are also downside risk. Downside risk includes exclusion, and it includes deprivation of people who depend on land and water for their living. The point then is, how do you manage the risk in an acceptable manner that will allow the investor to benefit from his or her investment, but at the same time make sure that national objectives as well as human welfare is not compromised. Part of the risk is that even in areas where there's supposed to be ample non-cultivated land, that land belongs to someone. It either belongs to the state or it belongs to families. How do you ensure that when you acquire land, adequate compensation is paid to landowners? How do you promote an inclusive business model that will allow the farmers, smallholder farmers surrounding those large-scale enclaves to be able to benefit, both technically as well as in terms of income they derive from it? And those are the issues that IWMI as a research organization is trying to look into. How do you minimize risk involved in this foreign direct investment? And how do you propose solutions that will lead to a win-win situation rather than for a party winning at the expense of the other party? So the risk needs to be managed, and the risk needs to be assessed upfront before land is acquired, so that you go into this fully cognizant of what needs to be done to minimize the risk and to create a better situation for both parties involved in land.
So is anyone getting it right?
When you look at the scale of what is going on, it's fair to say that most of the investors now are not getting it right. There is a tiny minority, very tiny indeed, that are getting it right. And when you look at those that are getting it right, they are not part of the new wave of investors coming in now. Those who are getting it right have been people who have been investing in this sector for a long time. They're taking time to understand and get to know better what they need to do about what I referred to earlier on as the inclusive business model. The new wave of investors are investors not with deep knowledge of agriculture, and they come in from the perspective of the private sector business environment, where the mantra is to make a quick buck as quickly as possible. So what we need to do then is to identify those that are getting it right, those that are doing it correctly, learn and distill out what are the features of what they're doing that can then be scaled up in other areas where they're not getting it right. And that, I think, is the essence of our research, to be able to point out what are the preconditions as well as the factors you need to take into consideration if you want to get it right.